Hey guys, tonight we're checking into a medieval inn that's a little damp, a little drafty, and just loud enough to count as a performance venue. You've been traveling for hours on muddy roads. Your boots are soaked through and your temper is somewhere between mildly cursed and full Gregorian chant of regret. The sun set an hour ago and the air smells like someone's been boiling onions inside a sock. But there it is ahead, a flickering lantern, a warped wooden sign, and a door barely hanging onto its hinges. This is where you'll sleep tonight. Probably. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the crooked doorway of the inn with all the elegance of a wet sack of barley. The door slams behind you with a gust of wind that sprays ash from the hearth across the room. Inside, it's warm but not cozy. More like the old petting zoo for smells. There's a fire, yes, and something bubbling in a cauldron. But the dominant sound isn't crackling wood, it's snoring. Deep, guttural, nasal, oddly rhythmic snoring from at least 3 different corners. You're not alone. The common room is half full of travelers, peasants, and one guy who may or may not be asleep upright. The floorboards creak like they have opinions. A shaggy dog with one ear missing stares at you with the exhausted eyes of someone who's heard too many bedtime stories and not enough apologies. The innkeeper lumbers forward. He's roughly the shape and size of a cider barrel, but with more eyebrows. He offers you a key, which is actually just a nail tied to a string, and points to the stairwell. Room's upstairs, 7th mattress from the left. Mind the one with the hole. You nod, as if that explained anything. The stairs groan under your weight. Every step feels like it's about to decide you're too much trouble. At the top, you're greeted by a long, low-ceilinged hallway that looks like it was built by someone who hated right angles and used mud as a bonding agent. There are no private rooms. Just a single vast space with hay mattresses lined side by side and the occasional attempt at a curtain. You step over a suspicious puddle and locate your mattress. It's not a bed. It's a flattened mound of straw with a patchy wool blanket that smells like regret and goats. There's a clay chamber pot nearby with a chip shaped like Italy. Luxury? As you drop your travel bag, really just a tied-up shirt containing your 3 cleanest rags and a crust of bread? You glance around. The room is already full. 7 men, 2 women, 1 child, and 1 person of indeterminate status lying perfectly still under a hat. Everyone is snoring. But they're not just snoring, they're competing. Each snore has character. The blacksmith in the far corner sounds like he's trying to inflate a pig through a reed. The man next to you wheezes like an accordion being stepped on by regret. And somewhere near the fireplace, a woman emits a high-pitched whinny at perfect 4-second intervals like a tea kettle being very patient. You lay down on your assigned mattress, exhaling deeply. The straw shifts beneath you. One piece pokes your spine, another finds your ear canal. You try to roll onto your side and accidentally elbow a man behind you, who snorts, burps, and rolls away without waking. This is going to be a long night. You tuck the blanket up to your chin and try to relax. The warmth is acceptable. The noise is pervasive. Someone lets out a snort so violent it makes the dog downstairs bark, once then go silent again, likely out of respect. Historians still argue whether medieval inns were intentionally this noisy, or if the snoring contest were just a convenient excuse for poor construction and thin walls. But one thing's clear, the guests here are proud of their volume. A few people are even sitting up watching, taking mental notes. There's chatter from the corner. He's good, but not as good as Osric last week. Did you hear the double snort cadence? I give it a 7 for nasal tone, but only a 5 for vibration. You've stumbled into something. Not just a bad night's sleep. An event. A tradition. A full-blown snore-off. You blink slowly, lying back on your prickly straw pad, realizing you've just entered a very particular kind of chaos, one that the inn fully embraces, perhaps even encourages. And while you originally came here seeking warmth food and maybe a nap without being sneezed on by a stranger, what you've truly stumbled into is a sacred ritual of medieval group lodging. The nightly battle of nasal supremacy. To your right, a man with a tunic 2 sizes too small lifts his head briefly. He gives you a nod that says, You'll get used to it, then drops back into a slow rumble like distant thunder over a cabbage field. You shift again, feeling the mattress crinkle beneath you like a sack of dry onions. There's no privacy, no walls, no curtains. Just body's breath and the symphony of collapsing sinuses. Eventually you doze a little, then jolt awake when someone across the room emits a snore so high-pitched it almost harmonizes with the rafters. There's a rhythm to it all, a weird kind of order. Each sleeper brings their own tempo, their own tone. Some snore in short puffs, others go long and theatrical like a wind instrument losing motivation. One man near the door even has a whistle to his exhale like a kettle about to confess something. Your eye drifts to the rafter above you, splintered, soot-marked, and crooked. From one corner hangs a faded sign, burned around the edges, but still legible. It reads in shaky ink, "No waggling the snores after midnight, innkeeper's rules." Waggling the snores. You wonder if that's local slang for something, or if it's simply a joke that lost its punchline 6 centuries ago. Either way, the rules exist, and as you'll soon discover, they're taken seriously here. The innkeeper appears at the top of the stairs carrying a lantern in one hand and a rusty cowbell in the other. He rings it twice. "All right, you lottie croaks. Snore-off begins in 1 hour. Get your nostrils ready." Some people cheer, others just grunt. A few sit up and start stretching their jaws in circular motions. One woman pulls out a pouch of dried herbs and begins stuffing a small cloth sachet, murmuring something about opening the airways of destiny. You sit up still unsure whether this is elaborate local theater or just a symptom of long-term exposure to drafty ceilings and boiled root vegetables. And then a young boy, barefoot, shirtless, and covered in soot, like he rolled through a chimney looking for enlightenment, approaches you with a ceramic mug. "You want the pre-snore brew?" he asks. You squint at the contents. It's thick, brown, vaguely steaming. "What's in it?" you ask, like someone who still thinks ingredients might be relevant. "Mostly turnip," he says proudly, "and a little thistle. Helps the throat rattle better." You decline with a polite shake of the head. He shrugs and drinks it himself, coughing once, then belching what smells like licorice and shoe leather. This, it turns out, is not just a sleeping arrangement. It's an entire ecosystem. And while modern folks might book hotels based on amenities like feather pillows or blackout curtains, medieval travelers had far more practical concerns, not getting fleas, not being stabbed, and increasingly not being out-snored in front of strangers. Because here's a detail that's been preserved in obscured letters and dusty tax records: some inns did, in fact, host informal snoring contests. Historians still argue whether these were deliberate events or spontaneous traditions that caught on like pie-eating contests or passive-aggressive embroidery circles. But a few surviving records reference such gatherings, often in inns located along high-traffic trade routes, places where weary travelers had little choice but to coexist in poorly insulated group rooms. And when everyone sleeps in the same space, sounds become stories. Winners of the snore-offs, often judged by fellow guests or the innkeeper, might earn a free breakfast, a drink on the house, or simply bragging rights. Losers were given little more than rolled eyes and the occasional boot to the ribs. Back in the room, the air thickens with anticipation. Someone hands out small wax balls, homemade earplugs. You accept one and sniff it. Lavender scented. And also vaguely like bacon. You tuck it behind your ear for later. The innkeeper's daughter walks through the room with a large board, setting it against the far wall. It's covered in scratched initials and tally marks. Above it reads Golden Goose Feather Championship. Current holder, Osric. Osric, it seems, is a legend. He once made a lute string snap with his snore, someone whispers behind you. No, another voice corrects. It was the lute player's patience that snapped. The fire cracks, the dog snuffles in its sleep. And somewhere outside, a rooster crows prematurely, clearly confused by the noise. You settle back into your straw heartbeat, slowing slightly. The contest hasn't even started yet, and already your nerves are humming. Not with fear, but with curiosity. Because tonight you won't just hear history, you'll snore through it. The moment you try to rest your eyes again, someone nearby lets out a snort so bizarrely melodic that it startles even the creaky bed frame beneath you. It starts low like a distant ox groaning in a cave and rises to a wet crescendo that ends in a whimpering sigh, as though the very soul of the man tried to leave his body mid-dream and changed its mind halfway. This is not sleep. This is performance. You prop yourself on one elbow and glance across the dim dormitory. The low, flickering firelight casts shadows against the warped timber beams, making the inn feel more like a haunted flute than a place of rest. And then he speaks. "I'm the loudest man in Dorset," says the figure lying 2 mattresses away. He doesn't sit up. He just delivers the sentence flatly like someone announcing the time of day. Around him, a few heads nod in acknowledgement. One man claps once. A woman makes a dismissive hupt sound but doesn't offer any counterclaim. You eye the self-proclaimed champion more closely. He's middle-aged with a chest the size of a beer barrel and a beard so bristly it could shave someone else. His eyes remain closed as if he doesn't need to be awake to assert dominance. "You cracked a beam once, didn't you?" says a man nearby. The bearded Snore nods. "Third joist on the left. Back in August. It was raining." A few guests look up at the ceiling as if to find the historic crack. And there it is just above you, a visible split in the timber, carefully sealed with wax and optimism. You begin to understand that in this inn, snoring is not just tolerated, it's revered. It's spoken of with the kind of tone reserved for knights' tales or particularly good bread. The bearded man rolls onto his side. "You want a preview?" You don't answer. He takes your silence as consent. He takes a deep breath, puffing up like a bellowing forge, and then lets it go in a slow, bubbling moan that sounds not unlike soup boiling over into a shoe. The entire room holds its breath. When he finishes, a low round of applause drifts through the space. A single chicken clucks approvingly from downstairs. The dog, now visibly more invested than earlier, lifts its head and lets out a short, sharp bark, either in salute or concern. Loudest in Dorset, he repeats softly, and then returns to what might be sleep, or simply focused resting. You exhale through your nose and lay back again. The mattress crackles beneath you like old paper. It's not comfortable, but you realize something important. Comfort is not the point. This isn't the kind of place where sleep is quiet, or sacred, or polite. It's competitive. And perhaps that makes sense in a world where heat is scarce, walls are thin, and entertainment has to be made on the spot with what you've got. Which, in this case, is your own nasal cavity. Historians still argue whether medieval people valued loud snores as markers of masculinity health, or simply body-based chaos that brought some levity to long, dark winters. But written accounts from the period, particularly those from traveling monks and disgruntled noblemen, include plenty of references to boisterous sleeping companions. Nocturnal nasal battles, and once delightfully, the horned sleeper who unseated the quiet peace. You glance back at the beam. If that man truly did cause structural damage with nothing but his deviated septum and a bowl of lentils, maybe you're not qualified to judge. The door creaks open downstairs and a new traveler steps in soaked. Staggering and squinting like he walked here from a previous century. "Oh no," someone whispers, "not Osric." The room stiffens. Even the champion of Dorset opens one eye. Osric, the current title holder. His name's etched in soot above the hearth carved into the betting board, and apparently whispered like a bedtime curse across 3 counties. He walks slowly, deliberately. His tunic is patched but regal, and he carries with him an air of confidence that says, "Yes, I may sound like a war horn full of bees when I sleep, and you're lucky to witness it." He sets down his pack. No one speaks. Osric gives a small bow and mutters, "I hope I'm not too late for the warm-up." He's not even close, because tonight's just getting started. And in the medieval world, before lullabies, before sound machines, before YouTube, sleep loops of gentle thunderstorms, there was Osric and people like him. Who could turn the act of unconscious wheezing into a form of folklore? The dog whines softly and crawls beneath a bench. A few guests start murmuring bets, and you smile slightly and shift on your straw, letting the scratchy blanket rise just below your chin. Because the real show hasn't even begun. The tension in the room changes the moment Osric removes his boots. It's not just the smell, though, that alone could knock out a lesser bard. It's the unspoken acknowledgement that a veteran has entered the arena. You watch as he carefully lines up his things with a military precision that feels out of place in a room where someone is currently using a goose as a foot warmer. He doesn't speak again. He just lays down, tucks a woolen scarf behind his head, and shuts his eyes. He's not here to brag. He's here to perform. And the room knows it. The man beside you, the one who once shattered a beam, coughs lightly and clears his throat but doesn't challenge. Even he knows this is Osric's turf. He pulls his blanket tighter around his shoulders and mutters, "He's got nasal control like a windmill with a grudge." You sit up slightly, trying not to creak the straw too loudly. Around you, other guests are adjusting their positions, leaning on elbows, whispering predictions. The innkeeper reappears. He's now holding what appears to be a carved stick with notches on it, some crude tally marker. He calls into the room. We begin in 15 minutes. Place your bets. No cabbage IOUs this time. A young woman stands and heads over to the chalkboard near the fire. On it are names, doodles of ears, and some sort of odd system that appears to rely mostly on shapes of bread. You approach. She offers a grin. Newcomer. You want in. You scan the list. Osric's name is circled in something that might be soot or mushroom ink. Beside it, a tiny crown. Below him, Gareth the Squeezer Toothless Midge, and someone has scrawled, you know, the guy with the harmonica nose. You spot your own name. Sort of. Someone's written Wet Hat Stranger in the corner with a question mark. You ask, what do I get if I win? She shrugs. Your name on the board. Free broth. And people clap while you sleep. It's weirdly fulfilling. You nod. Who needs glory anyway? Back at your mattress, the snoring warm-ups have begun in earnest. One guest is gargling something minty. Another is doing a kind of seated breathing exercise that looks like dramatic yawning. Osric hasn't moved. This, it turns out, is part of his mystique. He never needs to prepare. His snore is effortless, unstoppable. As natural as the sunrise, only louder and more nasal. There's a hushed awe around him like he's the Mozart of mucus. You settle in again, wrapping yourself in the blanket and trying not to overthink how this has become your night. You were looking for rest. Instead, you've found a kind of sleep-based gladiator arena where the weapons are crooked septums and soft pallets. You suppose there are stranger things. Across the room, a man starts explaining Osric's technique in an overly academic whisper. He doesn't just inhale, you see. He builds pressure on the exhale and releases it through the sinus like a tuned pipe organ. Someone else nods. Yeah, he once did 4 tones in one breath. Like a bagpipe that's had a tough childhood. A scholarly-looking guest chimes in. Historians still argue whether his pitch is natural or enhanced by pickled onion brine. The room settles. The fire pops. And the dog begins to softly snore itself small, muffled little huffs that somehow sound embarrassed compared to the upcoming thunderstorm. You lie back. You close your eyes. And you imagine for just a moment that this is the kind of story you'll one day tell someone in a far-off tavern. That time, you wandered into a medieval inn and accidentally competed against a snoring champion with a name like a forgotten Shakespeare character. A bell rings. Not loudly, just a single note clear and thin. It's the signal. The snore-off has begun. Osric exhales. And then it starts. A low, rumbling roll as if someone is dragging a log across gravel underwater. It grows in volume, a deep vibration that seems to resonate through the floorboards and into your spine. You feel it before you hear it, like thunder approaching over a wet field. Then he shifts his head slightly. A whistling overtone joins the bass note like a flute player gently sobbing into their instrument. People gasp. Someone drops their cup. The bearded man in the corner nods slowly. That's the Osric swell, he murmurs. 3 phases. He's only on phase 1. Phase 1. You're not ready for phase 2. No one is. Phase 2 arrives without warning. One moment you're adjusting your itchy wool blanket and thinking, well, that wasn't so bad. The next, the rafters are humming. Osric's snore drops into a deeper register, almost subsonic. You don't hear it with your ears, you feel it in your chest like standing too close to a church bell. It's less a sound and more an atmospheric pressure event. Someone near the door hiccups involuntarily. The candle flames along the wall tremble in unison. The dog, bless it, whimpers softly and scoots under a bench with its paws over its ears. Osric doesn't stir. Not even a twitch. His mouth hangs slightly open, head tilted at what now seems to be a practiced angle. You suspect this is part of his technique, his snore posture. One guest whispers. He trains with dry oats and an empty jug. Ancient Saxon method. You don't know whether to be amazed or deeply concerned, perhaps both. The innkeeper walks slowly through the room, now solemn as a monk, holding a long wooden spoon like a ceremonial staff. He taps it once against the wall. Phase 2, he says to no one in particular. Beginner class, plug your ears. You look around. Several guests have indeed stuffed wax cloth or bread bits into their ears. One man's using cabbage leaves. He winks at you, absorbs the vibrations better. You lie back again, unsure if you're part of history or simply caught in some medieval fever dream. Either way, it's happening. Because now Osric sustains it. This snore is a marvel of stamina. It drones like a war horn lost in a cave, moody resonance slightly wet. The tone never breaks, never falters. It just goes on, and on, and on. People begin to whisper their awe. He's at 30 seconds. No, 42. Someone time it. This could be the new record. And then he transitions. The shift from phase 2 to phase 3 is subtle but unmistakable. The bass drops away, replaced by a sharp, nasally buzz that wavers slightly in pitch, like a fly trapped in a bottle. It's less thunderous, but far more annoying. And somehow that's the point. It carries. The high pitch bounces off the beams, echoes around the chimney flue, and finds the worst possible angle to hit your eardrum. It's as if Osric has tuned his snore to weaponize inconvenience. The crowd loves it. Someone bursts into quiet applause. Another moans with what might be envy. A woman scribbles something into a parchment notebook and murmurs, "He's gone nasal." Pure nose work now. Impressive. You sit up slightly, unable to look away. Osric has not opened his eyes once. It's a performance, but also something deeply primal, like watching an animal display a natural defense mechanism. Only instead of puffing up its feathers or releasing an odor, Osric has chosen to ruin sleep through sonic domination. The innkeeper speaks again, voice low and reverent. Ladies and gents, the reigning champion has completed his warm-up. 37 seconds of phase 2. 18 seconds of high-pitched nasal buzz. And a proper glide into silent exhale. You didn't even notice the moment he went quiet. It was like watching a campfire fizzle still warm in the air, even after the flame dies. A silence settles over the room. Heavy, respectful. Then a sudden crash breaks it, someone falling backward off a bench, overwhelmed. The contest hasn't even officially begun. You lie back dazed. Osric rolls over, lets out one final puff that sounds suspiciously like a sigh of contentment, and begins breathing normally again. The room exhales with him. In a corner, a grumpy voice mumbles, "Still think he's cheating. Probably uses beeswax or prayers." Another replies, "No one snores like that by accident. That's training. That's craft." You're beginning to realize how serious this is. This isn't just a local pastime. It's a culture. Historians still argue whether medieval inns like this were genuinely known for these kinds of nightly sound rituals, or whether modern folklore has retroactively added a comedic twist. But anecdotal evidence exists, references to nocturnal disturbances, bedroom champions, and even a letter from a merchant in 1314 complaining that his sleep was ruined by a nobleman who snorted like a dying boar and was applauded for it. You wonder briefly what future archaeologists might make of tonight if they found only the chalkboard, the feather trophy, and a mug that reads, "Champion of the Third Wheeze." Then the innkeeper claps his hands 3 times. All right, warm-ups are over. We'll begin the first round shortly. All participants, please loosen your belts and hydrate. A murmur goes through the room. Everyone stands up. People begin stretching. A few do jaw exercises. One man even hums a soft Gregorian tone and then gargles ale to prime the pipes. You remain seated, and yet you already know you won't just be a bystander tonight. There's something in the air besides cabbage that tells you this night will be louder, weirder, and far more memorable than you'd planned. You sit frozen on your hay-filled mattress as the room begins to shift into something resembling a medieval locker room. There's a thrum of anticipation like the moment just before a jousting match, except here the lances are lungs and the battlefield is a shared mattress soaked in 4 generations of human ambition and ale stains. The other participants, your fellow snores in arms, have begun their rituals. The blacksmith near the hearth does neck rolls while chanting something that might be Latin, or possibly just an old pub song about turnips. The woman with the one visible nostril, clearly a regular, gargles raw honey and rubs her cheeks with goose fat. Someone in the corner does full body stretches, emitting little pops and groans as if tuning their entire skeleton for maximum resonance. This is not sleep. This is a sport. And you're beginning to see the strategy. The innkeeper now wearing what appears to be a hat made of feather stuffing. And dignity calls out Round 1 Miller from Glastonbury. A cheer erupts from the far left mattress. A man thick as an ox and proudly dusted in flower stands cracks his back and raises one fist to the ceiling. No snore, no loaf, he shouts. He lies down with flare arms behind his head and exhales so dramatically, he blows out one of the smaller candles. People scoot closer. You sit up, drawn to the moment. The miller closes his eyes, breathes in, and it begins. His snore is not loud. Not at first. It's rhythmic, steady, almost musical. A low huff, huff, huff with a tailing squeak, like someone dragging a boot across dry sand. Then it shifts. He inhales deeply, and on the exhale, his throat produces something new. A deep honk. Not sharp, but rounded almost. Elegant. The room goes quiet, save for the subtle clatter of someone accidentally dropping a tankard in awe. The honk continues now, layered with a sort of chesty rattle. It's as if a bagpipe and a distant cow have fallen in love, and are whispering to each other through a burlap curtain. Someone whispers he's added throat flutter. Bold move. Another murmurs, "That's the Glastonbury wobble." I've read about this. The miller hits a crescendo. His whole chest inflates like a leather bellows, and lets out one final snore that rises an octave at the last second, then falls away into pure silence. A pause. Then cheers. Actual applause. Even Osric nods slightly. That's respect. The innkeeper claps 3 times not to stop him. He's already stopped, but as a formal acknowledgement. He writes something onto the chalkboard. Miller. 7 plus 10. You're not sure who's scoring, or what the scale means. But it's happening. The next name is called Bruna of the Bellows. A short woman with arms like tree roots, and the neck of a swan rises from her cot. She cracks her knuckles. Her fan base, 3 other women sitting in a tight circle, begin humming something ominous. Bruna lies back, and it begins. Her snore is different. High-pitched, almost bird-like. A rolling trill like a dove cooing from within a wine barrel. It echoes strangely through the rafters, creating a mild harmonic effect that makes your eyes water. False whistling, someone hisses from the side. No replies another guess, she's just redirecting airflow through the cheek. Indeed, Bruna's snore includes a sort of side-mouth exhale, a fluttering noise that vibrates her lips. She's using her whole face to snore. And it's working. Even the dog sits upright, head cocked, clearly intrigued. She finishes with a small gasp and a roll onto her side, pulling her blanket over her head like a curtain fall at a one-woman theater show. The innkeeper scratches another mark onto the board. Bruna, 8.2. 10. Impressive. You realize now that this isn't random noise. These people have developed technique, artistry, maybe even a philosophy of nasal expression. Historians still argue whether these snoring performances were ever formalized. Some suggest that rural inns, particularly in trade hubs or pilgrimage routes, encouraged nighttime contests as a form of community bonding, especially in winter when daylight was scarce and boredom was lethal. Others argue it was all an accident, a product of overworked bodies, poor air circulation, and cabbage-heavy diets. But here tonight it feels deliberate, joyful even. You shift again, drawing the blanket around your shoulders like armor. The next name is called Toothless Midge. You don't get up, not yet. But your hands start to sweat a little. Your stomach flips with anticipation. You're not just a spectator in this strange nasal opera. Your nickname still waits on that chalkboard. Wet Hat Stranger. It might not be a title worthy of a ballad, but it might earn a snore. Toothless Midge, the innkeeper, bellows again, a twinkle in his eye as he raises the ceremonial spoon in salute. From somewhere in the corner, specifically beneath a pile of what looks like discarded cloaks, a tax ledger and half a lute emerges. A tiny woman no taller than the back of your knee. She might be 70, she might be 110, it's hard to say. But one thing is clear, she has presence. She stands adjusts a shawl embroidered with skulls and flowers and shoots the audience a look that silences even the rowdiest ale drinkers. Someone nearby whispers, "She once snored so hard she scared a bishop out of bed." Another adds, "And that was just during practice." Midge does not bow. She simply points to her mattress, walks to it with the determined pace of someone who once raced geese competitively, and lies down with spine-straight precision. Her pillow is a sack of what looks like rice and old lavender. Her blanket is stitched together from old priest robes, possibly stolen. Possibly gifted either way, she wears it like armor. She closes her eyes, inhales once, and begins. Midge's snore does not explode. It emerges. It begins with a low, steady vibration, so soft at first you think it might be your imagination. But no, the sound grows. It starts in her throat low and thrumming, then climbs through her nasal passage like a monk, humming through a reed flute. And then a twist, the sound splits. You blink unsure what's happening. It's real. Midge is producing 2 tones at once. a lower rumble accompanied by a high whistle, the two moving in and out of harmony. It's like medieval throat singing by way of dairy-based respiration. Someone lets out a stunned gasp. That's the double drone, someone says under their breath. That's legendary, says another, clutching their chest. You've never heard anything like it. It's not beautiful in the conventional sense, but it is awe-inspiring, like watching a weather event occur in miniature on a mattress beside a soup-stained curtain. She sustains it for 10 long seconds. 15. Then, just as the room begins to buzz with incredulous whispers, she cuts it off instantly, ending in perfect silence as if someone pressed pause on a cathedral organ. Gasps. Applause. Even Osric, unbothered until now, slowly lifts his head and gives a small, single nod. The innkeeper carves the score into the board. Toothless Midge, 9.1. 10. Highest of the night so far. The room stirs. People refill their mugs with silent reverence. Midge adjusts her robes and melts back into her blanket as if she never existed at all. Only the trembling air remains. You lie back feeling the straw shift beneath you like a sea of itchy mice. Your heart is beating a little faster, not out of fear, but out of the strange, absurd competitiveness that has started to infect you. There's a kind of magic here, yes, but also a whisper of opportunity. You're not a champion. You're not even dry yet. And still, something inside you says you might have a chance. The innkeeper clears his throat. All right, you lot. He calls eyes, glancing dramatically at the board. Before we bring in the returning champion, we've got a special guest tonight. A wild card. You know what's coming. He points his wooden spoon staff directly at you. The wet hat stranger. A long pause. Someone coughs. A man near the wall goes, who? And another replies, you know, the one with the confused eyebrows. All eyes are now on you. Your stomach turns, your mouth goes dry. You sit up trying to look confident. You wrap your blanket around your shoulders like a makeshift cape and walk toward the center mattress with the enthusiasm of a condemned man heading toward a very smelly gallows. You lie down, and you breathe. The straw pokes your shoulder blade. A dog licks your ankle. A moth flutters above the lantern. The room is watching. You close your eyes, and try. At first nothing happens. Then a squeak. It's your elbow, not your nose. Someone chuckles. You focus again. Breathe deep. Think heavy thoughts, boiled turnips, long walks in chainmail, damp socks inside damp shoes. The medieval mood sets in. And then it begins. Your snore comes out low and unexpected like a rusty bellows exhaling after a long retirement. It stumbles, it wheezes, but it persists. The room quiets. It's not beautiful, but it's emotional. Somehow your snore sounds sad. Melancholy. Like the ghost of a pigeon cooing inside a broken jug. You open one eye, see a woman tearing up. It reminds me of my first husband, she whispers. Your snore continues now, developing a kind of hiccup at the tail end. A soft hick-hick that adds rhythm. You can't tell if it's a flaw or genius, but they're listening. They're all listening. You finish with a long, flat groan that sounds like defeat. But the room applauds. Genuinely. The innkeeper raises both eyebrows. He looks at the board, shrugs, and adds, Wet hat stranger, 7 or 10. Not the worst, not the best, but memorable. And in a room full of nasal champions and goat blanket weirdos? It's not nothing. You roll back onto your elbow, not entirely sure what just happened. Your heart's thudding like a lute string under a smith's hammer. But the room's response was surprisingly kind. A few folks nod in appreciation. One man even pats your foot with the solemn air of a knight passing his sword. Not bad stranger, someone mutters from the shadows. You've got potential, little raw, little tragic, but potential. You whisper a thank you into your blanket. The innkeeper steps forward and holds up the ceremonial spoon with a flourish. All right, everyone, final warm-up contestant before the intermission. Osric. The name doesn't echo so much as settle. It lands on the room like dust after a sneeze. Everyone hushes. Even the firewood crackles more respectfully. Osric doesn't rise. He doesn't even blink. He just inhales. And then it begins again. But this time, it's different. This isn't warm-up Osric. This is showtime Osric. He starts low. A subterranean grumble that rolls through the floor like a landslide in slow motion. It's the kind of snore you'd expect to hear from a dragon dreaming of taxes. Deep. Patient. Powerful. Then, without a beat, he slides into a multi-tonal overtone. You swear there's a harmony in there. As if his throat and nose are having a conversation in Latin. The room is mesmerized. You glance around. People are swaying slightly. One man closes his eyes in quiet reverence, hand over his chest. The dog emits a soft growl, not from fear, but envy. Someone mutters, "That's phase 2 with retroglottal emphasis." Another replies, "I heard a minor third in that exhale." He's added a medieval interval. And then the flutter begins. It's subtle but unmistakable. Osric's lips begin to flutter. Not in a silly way. Not like a child pretending to be a horse. This is precision fluttering. Like a snore that's been trained by monks in a mountaintop monastery where vowels are sacred and consonants are optional. Each exhale sends a gentle purr vibrating through the air. Not loud, but clear. Musical, controlled. Someone gasps. A woman fans herself with her bonnet. The innkeeper simply writes Osric, pending on the board, and underlines it twice. Because no one dares raid him just yet. You lie there still cocooned in your scratchy blanket, listening to this nasal sonata, and wondering how something so absolutely stupid can also be so strangely beautiful. Historians still argue whether Osric was real, or just a name passed from snorer to snorer, an inherited legend. There are mentions of him in obscure innkeeper journals and scribbled margins of traveling monks' letters slept poorly due to nasal warrior known as Osric. Night disturbed again. He returns, the sound unholy, yet oddly soothing. The truth, no one knows for sure. But here tonight, in this inn lit by fire and candle and salted breath, Osric is real. And he's just hitting his peak. Because just as you think he's done, he lets loose a final snore, not loud, not complex, but elegant. It dips in pitch, rises gently at the end, and stops. Total silence. A silence so deep it feels staged. Everyone waits. No one dares speak. The moment hangs there like a tapestry stitched from anticipation. Then slowly people begin to clap. Quiet at first, then stronger. Not the rowdy cheers from before, but the kind of applause one reserves for operas and coronations. Someone drops to one knee. Another tosses a single beat onto his mattress, an offering apparently. Osric does not acknowledge any of this. He simply turns over and snores lightly like the world's least arrogant thundercloud. The innkeeper, still holding his spoon like a bishop's crozier, whispers to no one in particular. "That's why he's champion." You exhale. You're not mad. Not even jealous. There's something wholesome about it all, like seeing a goose conduct an orchestra or discovering a wizard who only uses spells for baking. It's absurd. It's majestic. It's bedtime in the weirdest possible timeline. You look toward the board. Your name's still there. So is your score. But now it's surrounded by something more valuable than chalk. Respect. You rest your head again. The mattress groans. Your breath steadies. And as Osric drifts into quieter, unconscious rhythms, the rest of the room begins to settle too. You're not sure what's next, but you're starting to understand. In a medieval inn like this one, sleep isn't the goal. It's the sport. The air in the room has changed. Not in temperature or scent, those remain unwaveringly medieval, but in mood. The tension has softened. People recline. Ale mugs are lowered. Even the moths flitting around the lantern seem less erratic, as if they too have been calmed by the majestic absurdity of Osric's nasal performance. You lie back once more, staring at the dark beams above. One of them still bears a charred signature that reads, Gregory Champion Snorer, 1298. Beneath it, someone has etched disqualified snorted out a candle. You smile, which is dangerous because the smile tries to become a laugh, and that could wake the room. You bury your face into your blanket to stifle it, the scratchy wool brushing your nose with a faint smell of pickled turnip and historical doubt. Across the room, a few people are comparing notes. Not metaphorically actual notes. Quill scratch scraps of parchment analyzing things like volume spikes, tone variation, and lip flutter technique, left side bias. A man with wire spectacles and an unfortunate haircut is muttering to himself. It's definitely the velocity of the soft palate that creates the oscillation. Not the uvula alone. There's secondary airflow happening, somewhere between the sinus cavity and despair. You can't tell if he's a scholar or just extremely bored. You shift slightly, just enough to peer toward the hearth where the chalkboard now lists Osric pending judgment. Toothless Midge, 9.1. Brona Yostmetva. Wet Hat Stranger, 7.8. It's surreal. You're part of this. not just watching history becoming folklore if only for one night. Your snore may not have been the loudest or most melodic, but it had feeling. Someone even described it as evocative of personal loss, which is a pretty high compliment in a room full of ale breath and sinuses. The innkeeper walks the room again, spoon still in hand, tapping it rhythmically against door frames and barrels like a bedtime metronome. 15-minute intermission, he announces. There's a rustle of activity. Blankets are rearranged. Someone breaks open a wheel of questionable cheese. Another produces a small sack of walnuts and offers them around in silence like contraband. You're handed a clay cup of something warm and vaguely spicy. Probably ale, possibly soup, almost certainly not water. You sip. It tastes like cinnamon's lonely cousin and something leafy that's trying too hard. Snore tea, says the woman beside you. Keeps the airways moist, helps with glide. You nod as if that makes sense. You feel a strange kind of camaraderie building now. Despite the competition, despite the fact that several people here have actively weaponized their throats, you feel welcome. No one's trying to outdo anyone for glory. It's about the craft. In the far corner, a group has gathered to share techniques. Someone demonstrates how lying on your side with a specific stone under your jaw can deepen your register. Another describes a pre-snore vocal warm-up involving humming into a mug. A bald man with a long neck claims he once trained with a lute player to match pitch. His apprentice, a child no older than 10, nods gravely and holds up a chart labeled Snore Modes from Aeolian to Aggravated. You chuckle, then cough, then realize the moment you did both in sequence. Someone made a note about it. Add that to his range, you hear. It's all very serious and very silly at the same time. The best kind of absurdity. Historians still argue whether this kind of structured, almost reverent attention to snoring actually existed, or if the concept evolved from exaggerated traveler tales and the dry humor of scribes trapped in cold scriptoriums. But there's enough evidence, enough playful references in tavern songs and innkeeper ledgers to suggest something like this happened. And frankly, as you sit here sipping spiced snore tea next to a man debating uvular velocity thresholds, it doesn't matter whether it's historically ironclad or not. What matters is the feeling. The sense that in a world of hard labor, short lifespans, and far too many root vegetables, people still found time to gather laugh and compete at being the loudest sleeper in the room. You lean your head back and close your eyes again, not to nap, but to listen. To the hum of voices. The occasional burp. The flutter of feet shifting against straw. The long, comfortable silence between silly conversations. And slowly the room begins to quiet again. The intermission's ending. The innkeeper with dramatic flair lifts the spoon. All right, champions, next round begins shortly. You glance across the fire-lit space where Osric now sits cross-legged, breathing slowly through one nostril like a yogi preparing for a storm. You smile. This is the strangest, warmest competition you've ever not quite entered. And it's only just begun. The lanterns have dimmed a little. Not because anyone turned them down, no, this inn runs on stubborn candle wax and passive-aggressive wind drafts, but because the air itself feels thicker, like the night is settling its weight across the beams. The contestants begin reassembling on their mattresses. One man readjusts his nightcap so precisely you'd think he was preparing for portraiture. Another smooths out his blanket like he's tucking in an invisible child. Osric, of course, remains motionless, save for the slow, rhythmic rising of his chest, a perfectly timed pendulum made of wool and nasal confidence. You lie back on your now slightly less itchy straw pad and feel a hush fall over the room, soft as falling flour. The innkeeper steps into the center with that same spoon raised like a conductor's baton. Welcome back to the grand snore-off, he says with a grin, as if this is all perfectly ordinary and not the result of centuries of cabin fever and fermented cabbage. He looks around the room. Our next competitor, he announces, needs no introduction because no one ever asked for one. There's a chuckle. Then he points dramatically. The tinsmith from Tavistock. A man rises slowly from a mattress near the back, brushing crumbs from his lap as if unveiling a sacred scroll. He is tall, wiry, and angular like someone sculpted from leftover fireplace tools. His nose is long and sharp, the kind that suggests either royal ancestry or multiple unfortunate encounters with low door frames. The room watches with a strange blend of fear and respect. He gives no nod, no bow. He just lies down, exhales, and lets the silence speak for him. Then he begins. It starts sharp. not subtle like the others. His snore arrives like a saw through pine, rhythmic, mechanical, precise. Reek! Reek! Each breath sounds like a carpenter late for a deadline. People lean forward. One woman mutters, "That's not a snore. That's infrastructure." But there's beauty to it in a way. Each note lands exactly where it should. The pacing is flawless. No hiccups, no stutters. Just raw, dependable vibration like a metronome operated by a very sleepy woodpecker. Halfway through, he shifts his head slightly to the left and the sound changes. It softens, deepens, becomes more metallic. "He's using resonance through his teeth," someone whispers. No, says another, more impressed. "Former teeth." A third man leans in, eyes wide. He's snoring through old fillings. That's advanced work. You're not sure what's real anymore. Is this inn full of elite nasal athletes, or is it simply a place where boredom and snoring collided so long ago they gave birth to a subculture? Historians still argue whether professional snorers existed. Some claim that during long winter months, certain inns and guild halls encouraged performances, any performance, to keep morale up. One monk's chronicle from 1287 describes a man who sung through his sleep with thunderous grace, pleasing the crowd though unbothered by it. You believe it now, because the tinsmith finishes with a double exhale one, high-pitched one, guttural, then simply turns over as if he's deposited his entry and wants nothing more to do with it. Applause breaks out. Even Osric's eyebrow lifts half a millimeter. The innkeeper, eyes twinkling, writes tinsmith, 8.6010. The competition's heating up, but not in a blood sport kind of way. It's more like a bake-off. Everyone wants to win, but they'll still pass you a crust of bread afterward and say, "Nice work on the crust." You hear whispers about the next round. "They're bringing out the widow." Oh no. Yes, she's back. Apparently this is big. The innkeeper clears his throat. All right then, our next participant needs no spoon. There's a pause. Then the crowd parts. And there she is. The widow. She's small, draped in 7 layers of shawls, each one older than the next. Her eyes are like ink drops, still unreadable and slightly damp. She walks slowly, but each step lands with intent like a lullaby in motion. She doesn't speak, doesn't smile. She simply lies down, adjusts a ceramic flower pendant on her chest, and places both hands over her belly. And then, silence. For 10 seconds. 20? 30. People shift uncomfortably. Then a sigh. And with that sigh, a snore emerges. So faint you might miss it if you blink too hard. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's beautiful. Soft round notes rise and fall like a lullaby sung by someone dreaming of lullabies. There's a tremble to it, a tremble that suggests grief, yes, but also serenity. A sound that feels like the last page of a diary, the moment between memory and dream. No one speaks. You feel a lump in your throat completely unrelated to your own pending turn. The widow continues for nearly a full minute. Her snore grows richer, deeper, and then fades like a tide receding through curtains. When she finishes, the room doesn't clap. It just breathes, and then, as if remembering itself, the innkeeper writes, "The widow." 9, 5, 10. The new leader, and still no one cheers. It would feel wrong, like applauding the moon. You lie back overwhelmed. This isn't a contest anymore. It's art. The room remains still. The only movement comes from a single beat rolling across the floor, nudged gently by the breeze from the hearth. No one retrieves it. It feels like the kind of moment where even vegetables understand they need to be quiet. The widow turns on her side, tucks her shawl beneath her chin, and lets out one last unintentional exhale, soft, wheezy, like the world's oldest teapot preparing to forgive someone. A man near the back wipes his eyes. That was... He says, then pauses, unsure how to finish the sentence. Another man simply puts his hand on the first man's shoulder. No words, just a nod. The innkeeper doesn't break the silence. He simply lifts the spoon high overhead as if in salute, then lowers it slowly. The contest isn't over, but it might never top that. Still, the show must go on. And when it comes to medieval inns, the show usually involves someone farting in their sleep and claiming it was a sneeze of the hips. But not yet. First, the crowd needs time to recover. And so, unofficially, the next round begins with someone simply referred to as the Carter, a broad-shouldered man who smells like rope and regret. He doesn't announce his presence. He just flops onto the nearest mattress and starts snoring almost immediately, as if the performance was purely accidental. And what a performance it is. His snore sounds like someone stirring gravel with a ladle. There's a crunch to it, a gritty undertone that suggests poor decisions and worse soup. But it's consistent and loud and oddly satisfying. That's the sinus grind someone notes with authority. He used to deliver firewood uphill in the rain. You can hear it in his exhale. You believe it. Because it's not just noise anymore, it's biography. Each snore tonight has become a kind of resume. Osric, the technical wizard. Toothless Midge, the throat-sung legend. The widow, the poet of air. And now the carter whose nasal congestion could be sold as a memoir on parchment scrolls. The room begins to reanimate again, murmuring, debating. You catch the phrase reverse wheeze oscillation said in a tone usually reserved for sacred relics. A man near you, new possibly just arrived from the cold, leans in and whispers, "Is this every night?" You nod slowly, apparently. He says nothing more. Just lies back and listens like a pilgrim receiving the gospel via soft tissue vibration. Historians still argue whether this kind of thing was widespread or just pockets of eccentricity in isolated inns. One chronicle from 1375 mentions a longhouse of wheezing men, all of whom claimed knighthood in dreams alone. Another reference calls snoring a common room ritual of the tired and the proud, suggesting it was at least semi-ritualized among frequent travelers. But the scholarly debate doesn't matter much when you're lying next to someone generating enough air pressure to inflate a wineskin with every exhale. The carter finishes abruptly as if someone cut his snore mid-sentence. He lets out a final grunt and shifts positions, now producing a quiet hum that might just be digestion. His score is posted in quick strokes. The carter, 7.4/10. Not bad. Solid middle tier. Definitely above Gareth the Squeezer, who apparently once aspirated a button during a performance and had to be disqualified due to audible distress. The innkeeper steps forward again, this time with less ceremony. We'll take 2 more before final judging. There's a rustle of tension in the room. The field is narrowing. You glance toward the chalkboard. Your name still clings to its place in the top 5. Barely. But with every new contestant that grip loosens. You think of your snore, honest, untrained, tinged with emotional confusion and possibly residual dampness. It wasn't elegant, but it was real. You adjust your blanket, settle deeper into the mattress, and tell yourself you're not nervous. Just alert. Just mildly caffeinated by anxiety and poorly fermented ale. The next name is called Silent Bert. You raise an eyebrow. That seems counterproductive. A skinny man stands slowly, bones clicking like castanets. He doesn't speak. He just nods. Lies down and immediately goes limp. He breathes in, and nothing happens. The room holds its breath. Then faintly the whisper of wind. A noise so delicate, so unbelievably soft that it's barely audible over the crackle of fire. But it's there. A thin, breathy tone that feels like someone blowing gently over the mouth of a bottle half filled with melancholy. Someone gasps. He's pulling a negative snore. You don't know what that means. But people are into it. Less is more, a woman murmurs. It's a statement. It's rebellion, says another. Against nasal excess. You lie there torn between admiration and a strong desire to open a window. Silent Bert sustains his whisper snore for a full minute. Then, nothing. He simply stops. The room doesn't clap. It nods. The innkeeper face unreadable chalks up the final score before the last contestant. Silent Bert, 8.1/10. A slow exhale passes through the room. You feel it. A communal release, not sleep. Not yet. Just surrender to the weirdest night of your life. And now there's only 1 slot left. The innkeeper doesn't even announce it. He just stands by the chalkboard, spoon in hand, eyes sweeping across the room like a monk evaluating his choir. The fire flickers. The shadows stretch. Somewhere upstairs, a floorboard groans with the weight of time, or rats, possibly both. And then, from the corner by the hearth, someone slowly rises. She wasn't on the list. She wasn't on any list. But the room knows who she is. No, someone whispers. She's back. It's Granny Floss. You blink. Granny Floss. There's movement around you. Blankets tightening, mugs quietly lowered. One person begins murmuring a prayer that might be in Old Norse. Granny Floss isn't intimidating in the traditional sense. She's small, slightly stooped, wrapped in layers of mismatched fabric that look like they were borrowed from a scarecrow in a bishop's laundry pile. Her eyes are the color of thunderclouds that have seen things. Her mouth is a tight line, and her hands steady as iron. She doesn't speak. She doesn't need to. Because Granny Floss has won before. You can tell by the way Osric straightens his back ever so slightly. by how the widow reaches into her blanket and clutches her pendant a little tighter. This woman is legend. She hobbles slowly to the open mattress someone had already made space just in case, and lowers herself like someone carefully placing down a sacred relic. She lies flat, arms by her sides, eyes wide open. Then with one deep breath, she begins. And instantly you understand the fear. It is not a snore. It is a storm. A sound that erupts from somewhere between her lungs and the dawn of civilization. It's layered. It's textured. It's ancient. It sounds like parchment being torn beneath the hooves of angry angels. People flinch. Someone drops a spoon. You grab your blanket instinctively, not for warmth, but for security. Her snore rolls like thunder, deep and curling with sudden cracks of nasal intensity that make the rafters tremble. It surges and withdraws almost tidal. One moment it's a gentle purr, the next it's a full-bodied rumble like two bears wrestling in a cathedral made of soup bowls. Dear heavens, someone mutters. She's improvising. She's playing polyphonic congestion, says another, eyes wide. She's using both nasal passages and a back molar gap. I thought that technique was lost. Indeed, it was rumored Granny Floss once trained under a man known only as the Bellows, a mythic snorer from the southern marshes who could mimic thunder horse hooves and market haggling all while unconscious. Whether that's true or not, the woman currently vibrating your soul has clearly mastered something. She rolls slightly onto her side and the snore evolves. Now there's a melodic flutter, a kind of rhythmic quaver that sounds like a cat purring while reciting scripture. Even the innkeeper stumbles backward a step. His spoon trembles in his hand. The chalkboard is blank. No one's scoring yet. You glance at Osric. He's sweating. Actual sweat. He wipes his brow with the corner of a ragged scarf and watches like a knight facing a dragon. Not with panic, but with the grim reverence of someone who knows they may not win this time. Granny Floss continues. Her eyes are still open. You feel like you're looking into the past, present, and future, all of which are currently snoring at 84 decibels and climbing. A log shifts in the hearth. Sparks fly. Granny doesn't flinch. She's not here to entertain. She's here to conquer. Historians still argue whether figures like Granny Floss actually existed, or if they are an amalgamation of rural storytelling and exaggerated ear trumpet tales. But scattered notes from 15th century tavern logs include references to snore crones, widows of wind, and the matron who brought down the shingles with her third breath. You believe every single one now, because in this moment, as her snore reaches a climax of rumbling echo and squeaky tail-end wheeze, you feel like you're witnessing something holy. She exhales, and then stops. The silence feels violent. Someone gasps, not out of fear but relief. Granny Floss closes her eyes. At last, the innkeeper, visibly shaken, approaches the board. His hand hovers. He hesitates. Then slowly, carefully, he writes, Granny Floss, 9.910. The room doesn't cheer. It exhales. No one dares speak. One man just sits quietly and eats his hat. Literally. It's small and made of bread, but still. You lie back dazed. What was supposed to be a place to sleep has become an opera. What was supposed to be rest has become ritual. And you were part of it. Not the champion, not the prodigy, but the wild card. The damp-footed, wide-eyed newcomer who stood well snored among legends. And that somehow feels enough. The contest is nearly over, but the night, oh, the night still hums with echoes. The room hangs in a hush that doesn't quite qualify as silence. It's more like a collective exhale suspended in the rafters a moment, too sacred or too bewildered to puncture. Granny Floss has returned to stillness wrapped tightly in her quilt of legends, her face neutral and her nostrils resting after their tour de force. The fire crackles quietly. Somewhere a cup settles unevenly on a warped table with a dull clink. No one moves. Even Osric, the once unchallenged king of sonic slumber, remains seated staring at the wall as though it just told him he'd been demoted to second place in his own tavern. You lie there processing everything. You weren't prepared for this. You came seeking shelter from the rain warmth from the hearth, maybe a few hours of quiet. Instead, you found a snore-based hierarchy so refined it could probably apply for tax exemption as a performing arts guild. A man near the hearth clears his throat cautiously. So, are we judging now? The innkeeper stares at the spoon in his hand as if he forgot how he got it. Then, reluctantly, he nods. We begin the final vote. He sets down the spoon and retrieves a sack old leather patched in places with wax and string. From it, he pulls out stones. Smooth flat, about the size of an egg yolk. Some are gray, some are a faint ochre. One has a beetle fossil embedded in it. He holds them up like they're sacred relics. Each of you gets one vote, he says. One stone, one name. He walks slowly from mattress to mattress, letting each guest whisper their chosen champion. In exchange, they drop their stone into a large wooden bowl, each thunk like a heartbeat of consensus. You watch. Some stones go to Osric, loyalty perhaps, or awe of his technique. Others go to Midge, the living bagpipe. Several find their way to the widow whose melancholic masterpiece has haunted the rafters for a good hour now. One guest hesitates, then whispers, "Silent Bert," and does a little bow as if apologizing to the cosmos. You receive a stone. It's warm, smooth, smells faintly like soup. You hesitate. You think of Osric, how he brought structure, technique, and nasal pride. You think of Midge throat singing through time itself. You think of the widow who made everyone forget to breathe. But then, you glance at Granny Floss, still as ever, eyes closed now, shawls barely rising with her breath. She didn't perform. She proclaimed. Not for applause, not even for the win, but because it was her right. You grip your stone and whisper Granny Floss. Thunk. You hand it over and the bowl accepts your offering. Once all the votes are cast, the innkeeper walks the bowl to the hearth. He kneels beside it, begins sorting the stones into piles with the kind of reverence usually reserved for relics or unpaid debts. He counts under his breath. A hush settles again. Then he stands. The champion, he says slowly, with 11 stones. A pause. You could hear a candle wax tear itself apart. It's Granny Floss. There is no cheer. Just a long, low murmur of awe. Heads nod. Eyes close. It's the closest thing to prayer this room is likely to experience all week. The widow smiles faintly from her mattress, not in defeat, but in peace. Osric bows his head in solemn respect. Even Silent Bert, still making quiet bottle breath noises, lifts 2 fingers in salute. Granny Floss does not rise. She does not speak. But one of her shawls shifts. That's all. The innkeeper takes down the chalkboard, wipes it with the corner of his shirt, and rewrites the new pecking order of greatness. 1. Granny Floss, 9.9. 2. The widow, 9.5. 3. Toothless Midge, 9.1. Quietus, Osric, 8.9. Fientis Bruna Smotodawin. Your name, Wet Hat Stranger, sits humbly below that. 7.8. Not bad for a first-timer. A man to your left leans in. You did all right. I've heard worse. Last winter, we had a guy who sounded like a goat trapped in a bell tower. Another adds, you've got tone. You just need confidence in the soft palate. Maybe work on your post-nasal arc. You nod as if you understand. You don't. But it doesn't matter. You belong now. You've snored among the best. And that changes a person. Historians still argue whether contests like this actually crowned winners, or if it was all in jest. But the line between tradition and parody is thin, and honestly, a little bit of both makes everything better. You lie back. The contest is over. But the night has just begun. The room slowly drifts into true sleep, not the performative kind, but the real warm, heavy-limbed surrender that only comes after laughter tension and very competitive nasal exertion. The snoring continues. But now it's not a performance. It's a lullaby. You exhale slowly, letting yourself melt into the mattress. The straw still pokes you in a few creative places behind the knee under one shoulder blade, and alarmingly close to your ear, but it doesn't bother you as much anymore. It's part of the place now. Part of the ritual. The snoring resumes not as a competition, but as a chorus. A shared song of weary bodies and open mouths. It rises and falls in waves, low rumbles, soft whistles, sudden snorts, and the occasional triumphant honk. You lie among it not annoyed, but oddly comforted, because now it's not noise, it's belonging. There's something strangely intimate about sleeping in the same room as strangers, especially when all of you have just spent the last few hours treating your nasal cavities like medieval trumpets. These aren't just noises anymore, they're signatures, stories, emotional weather patterns. You turn on your side and peek through the dim firelight. Osric is asleep now, curled slightly, mouth open in a quiet O. His snore is gentle now, no performance, no pressure, just soft vibrations like wind through linen. Dignified, tired, Toothless Midge is rolled up like a pastry, emitting rhythmic puffs like a chicken sighing in her sleep. The widow lies perfectly still, no longer snoring at all, but somehow radiating silence so deeply it almost hums. Granny Floss, of course, continues. Not with her earlier storm, but with the faintest edge of echo. A residual rattle. Her version of a lullaby you suspect. Her way of saying I'm still here. I'm still better. The dog snores too. You can hear it now, a soft, wet flutter. Probably dreaming of soup or goats or whatever medieval dogs thought about between chasing rats and stealing sausages. Outside you can hear the wind brushing against the shutters. A creak of wood. A distant owl. All sounds you might have noticed earlier and found eerie or lonely, but not now. Now they blend perfectly with the warmth of the room. The smells of sleep and sweat and soot, and the communal breath of a dozen snoring bodies. You smile. You almost laugh, but you don't. Because in this inn, laughter is for the evening, and quiet is for the night. You pull your blanket tighter. It smells of dust and herbs and maybe cheese. You no longer care. You're drifting, but your mind still hums. Historians may never fully grasp what happened here. There won't be detailed scrolls or royal decrees. Just whispers pass through generations' tales of an inn, where the loudest snore could earn you glory, where nasal tone was currency, and where people from all walks of life, blacksmiths, widows, drunkards, nobles, you came together in the strangest way possible. Not to fight, not to preach, but to sleep loudly. And proudly, you close your eyes. There's a twitch in your foot, a long exhale, and then without fanfare, you join them. Your snore isn't perfect. It crackles a little, it wanders. It pauses sometimes to consider its own decisions, but it's yours. And tonight, in this place, that's enough. Someone nearby shifts. A woman mutters in her sleep. Wet hat got rhythm. You grin in your blanket. And finally, you drift. You're floating now. Not in the poetic, metaphorical sense, but quite literally. It feels as though your entire body has unhooked from the lumpy mattress and is now hovering 3 inches above it, suspended by the strange magic of exhaustion. Fire warmth and communal breathing. The room is an orchestra. Each sleeper contributes their own humble instrument snores, sniffles, wheezes, the occasional hiccuped dream murmur. It should be chaos. It should be unbearable. But instead, it's hypnotic. Somewhere across the room, someone lets out a deep, thunderous exhale that ends with a gentle of satisfaction. It's the kind of sound you'd expect from a cow who's just figured out philosophy. Someone else follows with a high-pitched whimper snore as if a tea kettle were trying to remember a lullaby. And there you are, right in the middle of it all, wrapped in your blanket cocoon, straw mattress beneath the sounds of malleable sleep around you. A part of the night, a note in the song. Above you, the rafters shift with a soft groan. The wood sighs in sympathy, having hosted generations of restless, muddy travelers who've collapsed in this very spot, perhaps after similar contests, or perhaps just from a long day of hauling turnips and dodging plague. The fire has faded now, glowing soft red in the hearth. Shadows stretch long and sleepy across the floor, and the last crackling spark sounds like the whisper of someone putting a story to bed. You roll gently onto your back. The ceiling stares down warped and soot-smudged like it's watching over its snoring pilgrims. There's a small cobweb in one corner. A beetle crawls across a beam, pauses, turns, and goes back the other way. You salute it silently. It's clearly seen things. Someone coughs. Someone farts. Someone groans and adjusts the angle of their entire body with the dedication of a medieval carpenter fixing a squeaky cartwheel. And still the sleep continues, unbroken. You think of the chalkboard. Granny Floss still undefeated. The widow ethereal and stoic. Toothless midge warrior of the throat. Osric master of the technical form. And you, the wet hat stranger. Ranked lower, yes, but not forgotten. You came with nothing but wet boots and confusion. Now you leave with something stranger inclusion. You understand now what makes this place work. It's not just the hay or the ale or the occasional boiled onion bath. It's the shared weirdness, the communal absurdity, the way every guest here accepts that tonight's snoring is a team sport. You imagine yourself coming back, months from now, maybe next winter, the same mattress, the same smell. Perhaps you'll bring a better blanket, maybe a warm rock to sleep beside or a bag of dried fruit that you pretend is fancy but is really just last year's raisins. Maybe you'll even practice. Not like Osric, not serious training. Just little things. Trying different sleeping angles. Holding your breath before the exhale. Listening to the way your soft palate quivers when you dream about cheese. You chuckle softly at the thought, then remember the etiquette. No laughter past midnight unless it's through your nose. So you redirect it. And in doing so, you produce something. Not quite a snore, not quite a sigh. A soft accidental hum. It leaves your lips and vanishes into the room like a firefly blinking once and disappearing into the dusk. Someone across the room stirs, then replies with a short puff snore like punctuation. You smile. The conversation continues. Without words, without judgment. Just breath and blankets and long, forgiving mattresses. The innkeeper stirs once more, making one last loop of the room. He carries a small lantern, now half covered with a kerchief, so the light is soft and golden. He tucks in a shoulder here, adds a log to the fire. There, straightens a crooked corner of a blanket for someone already lost to dreamland. When he reaches your side, he looks down briefly, smiles, and whispers, "Not bad for your first night." He walks on. You don't reply, but you exhale. Deep. Content. Not from pride, not from sleep, but from something you didn't expect to find here in a musty inn with cracked beams and cabbage-scented air. Belonging. Outside, the wind is picked up again. It brushes along the stone walls of the inn like a giant hand, smoothing out a blanket over the countryside. You hear it press against the wooden shutters with a soft insistence, like it's trying to sneak inside, not to disturb, but to listen. And really, who could blame it? Inside the inn is more than shelter now. It's a living thing. A gently breathing beast made of old wood straw bedding and humans turned instruments. You're one of them now. One more rumbling note in the warm, wheezing choir. Someone nearby begins a soft, percussive snore. Rhythmic, almost polite. You follow with a half-conscious puff through your nose. It's involuntary now. You're past the performance. You're in the zone where sleep pulls your body inward, but your senses still float gently near the surface like feathers on stew. The mattress creaks beneath you, but it's not unpleasant. It feels like it's trying to communicate, like it's saying, yes. I've held thousands before you, and I'll hold thousands after, but right now you're doing just fine. You reach a hand out and graze the edge of the wooden frame. It's smooth in some places, worn in others. You trace a small groove, someone's initials maybe, or the result of years of belt buckles, scraping by in sleepy trips to the chamber pot. The inn breathes, and you breathe with it. Somewhere in the back corner, a new contestant. Someone who arrived late, judging by the muddy boots and apologetic snore, lets out a tentative honk. It flutters once, then stops. There's a beat, then applause. Actual applause. A few slow claps, a gentle tap of mug on wood. The snorer doesn't reply, but their next breath is bolder, a little longer, a little richer. That's the spirit, murmurs the innkeeper, barely audible over the crackling fire. The room lulled into its semi-conscious ballet of breath, and body heat accepts the newcomer without question. There is no gatekeeping here, just gate creaking. You smile in your sleep. Historians still argue whether medieval inns encouraged these kinds of communal rituals to cope with overcapacity and long winters, or whether it was simply human nature finding ways to turn discomfort into connection. And what is snoring really if not the sound of the body saying, I'm here? I'm alive. I'm tired in a way that laughter and ale couldn't fix. But I'm still part of something. You roll to your side, your face sinking into the patchy wool of your blanket. A tuft of straw brushes your cheek. You don't mind. You hear someone whisper, "Is it always like this?" A quiet voice replies, "No, sometimes it's louder." Another chuckle, another snore. The cadence of the room has settled into a perfect rhythm now, like a slow, ancient metronome played on the breath of peasants and queens alike. Rich and poor knight and thief, it doesn't matter here. The fire pops. A candle gutters. And then Osric snores again just once. A soft, proud rattle, like the last note of a concert played just for the hearth. A few guests murmur their approval. The room doesn't sleep all at once. It softens. It surrenders. It exhales. And though no one announces it, you know, the contest is truly over. Granny Floss may hold the title. But the real victory? Peace. Peace bought with blankets and breathing. With laughter. With straw. With that peculiar magic that only happens when strangers stop pretending they're strangers. You close your eyes fully now, drifting deeper. Your last thought before sleep. I wonder if there's a championship belt. Then the question fades, and you fall. Morning comes slowly in places like this, not with a jolt or a rooster scream, but as a gentle unwinding of the night. A slow, cautious peeling back of shadow from stone, of chill from straw. No curtains are drawn. No bells are rung. The light simply creeps in through the shutters, embarrassed to interrupt. You're still lying in the same position you drifted off in, which is rare. You're not usually this still in sleep, but something about the air, the warmth, the background harmony of human huffing and puffing, it held you there. Kept you wrapped like a burrito of medieval dreams. You don't open your eyes yet. You listen. The snoring has mostly faded now. What remains are faint murmurs. Breaths. The slow awakening sounds of humans returning from whatever dream soup they'd been stewing in. Someone coughs. Someone else groans like a broken cello. A mattress shifts. A toe bumps a jug. A blanket rustles. Granny Floss is the first to rise. Of course she is. She sits up with all the grace of a queen emerging from a feathered throne. She doesn't speak. Just smooths her shawls, adjusts her pendant, and begins brushing straw from her lap, one strand at a time. It's almost ritualistic. Toothless Midge is next. She cracks her neck, scratches her ear with remarkable ferocity, then nods to the ceiling like she's acknowledging an old friend. Osric wakes with a snort that might have been applause in another life. He stretches his jaw slowly the way a swordsman might stretch his arm after a long duel. Then he quietly retrieves a small wooden comb from beneath his mattress and begins combing his beard in soft, rhythmic strokes. You sit up too. Slowly. Your back cracks in 3 satisfying places. Your feet are somehow colder than your face, and your mouth tastes like dreams boiled in a clay pot, but you feel good. More than good. You feel rested. Not just physically. There's a strange lightness in your chest, like you've released something you didn't know you were holding. Maybe it was anxiety, or loneliness, or the belief that you needed to perform, even in sleep. Here, among the snoring legends of the realm, you performed simply by showing up. And somehow that was enough. The innkeeper enters the room with a small tray. On it are mugs of warm, liquid brown mysterious, and probably tea if you're lucky, soup if you're not. Morning broth, he says, simply setting the tray down on an upturned crate that passes for a communal table. A few guests move slowly toward it like cats pretending not to be interested. Someone tastes the broth and mutters, "Oh, good, they remembered the time this time." Another adds, "Tastes like sleep if sleep had socks." You sip yours. It's warm, slightly peppery, a little salty. Like memories of a stew someone almost got right. It's perfect. Conversation begins to trickle and soft. Unhurried like the beginning of a market day, no one's in a rush to start. People discuss their dreams, their sleep, their observations. Someone compliments your expressive nasal phrasing. Someone else suggests you work on your exhalation pacing. You thank them with a smile that turns into a yawn. The innkeeper claps his hands once not to wake anyone but to gather attention. Tonight he announces we begin a new season. Scores reset. New dreams to be dreamed. New snores to be sung. There's a murmur of agreement, not cheers, just quiet nods and one approving burp. You look around the room and realize no one's leaving. Not yet. Some will, of course. Travelers will come and go. That's what inns are for, but others, they stay. They return. They become part of the myth. You set your mug down and stretch one last time. Someone nudges your elbow. It's the young boy with soot on his cheeks, the one who offered you the pre-snore drink on your first night. He grins, "You gonna try again tomorrow?" You consider it. The mattress is still lumpy. The air still smells like boiled onion. And someone just sneezed directly into their blanket and mumbled an apology to no one. But yes you might. Because you've found something here that very few inns and fewer cities can offer. A place where you don't need to impress anyone. Where breathing is music. And sleep is a team sport. The inn slowly transitions from sleep chamber to something resembling a social hall. Blankets are folded well loosely bunched up and shoved toward the edge of mattresses. Someone uses a pillow as a makeshift tray for their breakfast walnut pile. A man near the back tries to stretch trips on his own blanket and mutters something in Middle English that you assume translates to, "I meant to do that." It's chaos, cozy chaos. You sip the last of your morning broth. It's cooled now and tastes faintly of dill and ash like someone dropped a spice rack into a fireplace and decided that was good enough for soup. You don't mind. You drink it anyway. Across the room, someone has started sketching the night's performances in charcoal on a square of flattened parchment. A crowd gathers. You wander closer. It's not just doodles. It's portraits. Each snorer captured mid-performance eyes closed, mouth agape blankets, flying one leg kicked out in dramatic flair. Osric is drawn like a Norse god reclining on a thundercloud. The widow appears as an angel descending through fog. You are rendered with a raised eyebrow and a little squiggle that might be a hat or might be confusion. Probably both. You admire it with the kind of humble pride one develops after being ranked 5th in a competitive snore-off without knowing the rules. The artist, a woman in a patched green cloak, grins at you. You've got something, she says. Unpolished, but it rattles. Like a cart full of wisdom teeth. You thank her. You don't fully understand the compliment, but you appreciate it anyway. At the far end of the room, 2 guests begin practicing. Not swordplay, not singing. Snoring. Intentionally. They lie down on adjacent mattresses and begin alternating nasal tones like a duet for deviated septums. One snorts. The other wheezes. Back and forth like a conversation in sleep speak. A crowd forms. Bets are made. Someone hands out pickled eggs. It's clear now this is not a one-night event. This is a culture, a lifestyle. A very strange, very wheezy community where the line between sleeping and performing is thinner than the mattress you spent the night on. You spot the innkeeper now pouring broth into a chipped jug and humming to himself. You approach. He sees you coming and smirks. You stayed the whole night. I did. And you snored. I did that too. Not bad, he says for a stranger with a wet hat. You laugh. I think the hat helped you reply. He nods solemnly. They often do. A pause. Then he leans in a little conspiratorially. If you're staying another night, we could pencil you into the warm-up roster. It's not formal, but people notice. You don't answer immediately. You look around. At Osric, now engaged in a thoughtful discussion about rib resonance. At Granny Floss, gently wiping crumbs off her winning shawl, while 2 travelers politely ask for her autograph. She hands them goose feathers instead, saying only, "These know the sound." At Silent Bert, asleep again, fully upright, snoring into his teacup. You smile. I think I'll stay. The innkeeper grins. We'll keep your mattress warm, or at least straw-filled. As you turn to return to your spot, someone hands you a small object wrapped in cloth. You unwrap it gently. It's a carved wooden whistle. Rough. Handmade. Shaped vaguely like a nose. You're one of us now, the artist says, nodding. You hold it in your hand, the little totem of a night, both ridiculous and somehow profound. A symbol that sometimes the strangest things are the most human. Historians still argue whether objects like this, tokens, relics of sleep and sound, were given in real medieval inns. There's no formal record, no museum displays. But maybe that's the point. Some traditions aren't made for books. They're made for shared moments, for laughter in the dark, for strangers becoming stories. You tuck the whistle into your bag, curl back into your mattress, and let yourself breathe. The contest may be over, but you've got the whole day to rest. By mid-morning, the inn feels like a different place. The air is less thick with dreams and more filled with idle chatter. The rustle of cloaks being shaken out and the steady rhythm of someone trying to sweep the floor with a bundle of twigs tied together by good intentions. You lounge near your mattress head, propped up on a folded tunic, sipping from a second cup of broth that tastes suspiciously similar to the first, though now with an extra note of cinnamon, or maybe that's just driftwood. Either way, it's comforting. A few guests begin packing. One man wraps his belongings in a single sock, shrugs and says, "That's everything, I suppose." Another woman stares at her blanket for a full minute before folding it with the care usually reserved for heirlooms or marriage proposals. The chalkboard still stands now, smudged slightly from all the admiring glances. Granny Floss's name glows in faint sunlight like it's been etched in gold. Your own name. Wet Hat Stranger has acquired a small drawing beside it. A hat with tiny movement lines indicating speed or confusion. You feel honored. Near the hearth, a woman with a wheezy laugh starts composing a ballad. You hear snippets as she sings to herself. Oh, the inn was warm, the broth was thin, and snores did rattle from within. But none did shake the shutters loose like Granny's wheeze of nasal truth. A man beside her taps along with a spoon and cup. Others hum. It's not exactly on key, but it feels right. Then the door opens. A new traveler enters. He's damp, muddy, looks like he hasn't slept in a week and carries a satchel that's twice as tired as he is. He blinks at the room, clearly expecting something more traditional. You recognize that look. You had that look. The innkeeper greets him with a friendly grunt and gestures toward the empty straw mattress, the one beside yours, now freshly fluffed, or as close to fluffed as straw gets. The newcomer approaches cautiously. Is this a good place to sleep? Someone nearby laughs not unkindly. It's a great place to sleep, you say, without looking up from your cup. Just be ready for the soundscape. He raises an eyebrow. Soundscape. The innkeeper places a mug in his hand. You'll see. The man glances around, at the sleeping form still tucked in here and there, at the chalkboard, at the strange carved whistle you now wear on a string around your neck. He hesitates. Then finally he says, well, as long as there's soup. There's always soup. He lays down with a grunt, tugs a scratchy blanket over his knees and stares at the ceiling, clearly unsure whether he's about to rest or join a cult. You give him a small nod. It's weirder than it looks, you say. Is that a good thing? You shrug. It might be. The artist walks by and hands him a small square of cloth. On it is stitched the word, inhale. She pats his shoulder and continues on. The day rolls on. Some guests leave stepping into the crisp air with full stomachs and even fuller lungs. Others stay tinker with feather quills, nap intermittently, or test their throat resonance by humming into jugs. The room begins to shift toward evening, not just in light but in tone. Dinner preparations begin. Same pot, same smell, different kind of magic. The innkeeper lays out fresh mugs and begins humming the familiar tune, the snore-off lullaby, as some are calling it now. You help gather kindling for the fire? Not because you're asked, but because you feel like part of the crew now. A regular, a character in the tapestry. As night approaches, the familiar preparations begin again. People fluff straw, stretch their jaws, place bets this time more quietly. Someone taps your shoulder. It's the innkeeper. Up for it, he asks. You look around. The air's thickening again. The candles flicker in anticipation. And your mattress? It waits. You grin. Yeah, I'll give it another go. He nods. Writes your name this time. No question mark on the new board. Just as the sun dips behind the trees and the wind picks up once again. You lie down and let the night begin. The sun vanishes entirely, now swallowed by the thatched rooftops and chimney smoke of the village beyond. The sky darkens to a deep medieval blue, the kind of blue that looks like it's been steeped in ink and old prayer. Inside the inn, the lanterns have been lit. The shutters latched and the dog has curled into its preferred spot beneath the firewood pile, snoring softly rhythmically like a furry metronome. It's happening again. The room begins to hum, not with voices, but with expectation. That charged stillness just before a choir sings its first note. Everyone knows what's coming. The newcomers fidget. The old hands begin their rituals. Osric cracks his knuckles and lays out a small piece of leather under his head like a pillow of honor. The widow adjusts her shawl. Bruna applies a dab of mint oil to each nostril and inhales with the poise of someone preparing for battle or pie judging. Toothless Midge, already prone, begins vibrating softly through her throat like a contented kettle warming up. Granny Floss has not moved since lunch, but her eyes are open. And they know. The new chalkboard has been hung. A fresh piece of charcoal rests beside it. Your name is already scrawled there, this time without parentheses. Without hesitation. You belong now. The innkeeper raises his spoon. Tonight's order is drawn, he says, flipping over a small piece of bark with carvings on it. Osric opens. There's a ripple through the crowd, not fear, not even excitement, but that rare reverent anticipation one feels when watching a master at work. Osric settles in. He adjusts the angle of his jaw, positions his feet precisely 12 degrees apart, lays one hand across his chest like a sleeping noble and exhales. And the snore begins. It's just as powerful as last night, but different. More restrained. He's holding back, showing range, playing with the form. A warm, rounded snore with a layered overtone. It sounds like a sleeping bear purring into a trumpet. Gentle, proud, subtle. You close your eyes, letting it wash over you. The audience listens like they're sipping fine wine, each note judged for clarity, pitch, and emotional damage. When Osric finishes with a soft little snort chirp, the crowd doesn't cheer. They sigh, in awe. The board reads Osric, 9.310. The widow is next. She lies back. Her breathing slows. Her hands fold over her chest like she's already been buried, and this is the most peaceful graveyard in the kingdom. And then she sings. Not with words, not with voice, but through sleep. Her snore is more like wind over glass. A thin, high whistle that trembles slightly, then holds like a single string on a harp, played by the ghost of sorrow. It's not loud, it's not showy, but it's profound. When she finishes, the fire flickers. Someone wipes their eyes with a sleeve. The widow, 9.410. Granny Floss does not rise. She does not need to. Her shawl flutters. A snore builds deep in her chest, then climbs like a ladder through time. She shifts once barely, and the sound echoes with something ancient. It doesn't feel like air moving through flesh. It feels like history retelling itself through a woman who refuses to die quietly. She hits a note no one can identify. Some call it the lost frequency. You feel it in your toes. Granny Floss, 9.8, tenor. Others perform, Bruna, Midge, the Carter. All strong, all brave, but the top tier is tight. And then, your name is called. You lie back. You exhale. The mattress groans beneath you. Someone coughs. A beat rolls across the floor again. Why is there always a beat? And you snore. Not on purpose, not with pressure, but with truth. It's not as loud, not as elegant, but it's real. You let your throat do what it wants. You let your nose wobble and your lips buzz. You give in to the moment. And somehow, it works. You're not sure what it sounds like. But when you open your eyes, people are nodding. Someone whispers that one had soul. The innkeeper writes on the board. Wet Hat Stranger, 8.310. A full point higher than the night before. You feel something bloom in your chest, not pride exactly, but belonging. You're not here to win. You're here to breathe with these people, to be part of something beautifully absurd and soothingly human. As the next round begins, you settle back into your blanket. The fire crackles. The snores resume. And the inn, it lives, with every inhale, and every exhale, and every strange, wonderful soul that dares to sleep loudly in the company of strangers. By the time the last contestant finishes a wiry man named Joff, who somehow snored in staccato bursts like a hiccuping squirrel with ambition, the room has descended into a kind of cozy post-performance haze. The fire's mostly embers now, glowing red like the heartbeat of the inn. Candles flicker down to their final curls of wax. A few guests still sit upright, clutching mugs or notebooks trying to write down snore sequences before they forget them. You hear the quiet scratch of quill on parchment, someone muttering about reverse palate flutter, and emotive wheeze patterns. But most have begun to fade. The inn doesn't fall asleep like a switch. It slouches into sleep one guest at a time. The chalkboard is left where it is, scores and all. No one needs to erase it. No one wants to. It stands now less like a scoreboard, more like a record of something sacred, foolish, and deeply real. You lie back once again in your assigned mattress. The straw feels softer tonight, not because it changed, but because you did. You've grown into the discomfort, made peace with the noises, found your place in the orchestra. Around you the snores start again, not on cue, not for points, but out of necessity. Out of comfort. Out of rhythm. You hear Osric let out a deep, steady exhale that turns into a long, vibrating growl. Bruna emits a 3-note snore followed by a gasp that sounds suspiciously rehearsed. Someone near the door begins with a soft hum and builds into a surprisingly impressive back-of-throat rumble. You add your own. It starts small like last time. A little inhale that rattles slightly. Then the exhale, a soft whew that flutters on the edge of conscious control. You're not doing it to impress, just to rest, just to join. And you do. You're not an outsider anymore. You're one of them, part of the Snorers Guild, the Breathers' Brotherhood, the Society of Unapologetic Sleepers. The innkeeper walks one last loop around the room. No spoon tonight, no announcement. Just quiet steps and the faint scent of whatever he uses to keep his boots from falling apart. He sees you. He nods, then extinguishes the last lantern. Darkness washes over the room. Not frightening, just whole. The dog sighs in its sleep, then shifts to face the wall like it knows something the rest of you don't. Maybe it's dreaming of championships past. You think about tomorrow. Will there be another contest? Will you try for a higher score? Will Granny Floss retire? Will Osric reclaim his crown? None of it matters now. Not tonight. Because this night belongs to the sound of tired people doing the only thing they know how to do. Collapse into each other's company, let go of dignity, and let their bodies make noise. Historians still argue whether places like this existed in the way stories describe them. Whether medieval inns ever became sanctuaries for communal sleep and friendly competition. Some say no, others say maybe. But you were there, and you didn't just witness it. You became it. Your final thought before sleep is not about winning or dreaming, or the weather outside. It's this, snoring is just laughter we haven't woken up for yet. Then without ceremony, you fall asleep and join the choir. By dawn, you're a part of the chorus again. Not as a soloist, not as a headliner, but as a proud, slightly congested tenor in the grand composition of medieval rest. You surface briefly from your dreams, something involving a bread jousting competition, and a goat that gave life advice and recognized the comforting drone of the room's collective breath. Each sleeper still hums in their own strange key. Bruna's nasal melody winds around Midge's rhythmic throat vibrato. Osric lets out long, even snores that sound like distant waves hitting a dock. And somewhere buried under 3 cloaks and a faint onion smell, someone emits a tiny squeak every 5 seconds like a mouse with performance anxiety. It's oddly beautiful. You roll to your other side. The straw squeaks beneath you, the blanket clings a little too tightly to one knee, and your left foot has gone cold. But all of it is familiar now. Comfortable. Beloved. Someone across the room wakes with a grunt, then immediately turns over and attempts to resume their performance. You respect that. There's something noble about trying to chase a dream back into your pillow. And then the door creaks open. Soft footsteps. No announcement. Just the gentle tread of the innkeeper's boots like a rhythm set to a slower, quieter drum. He begins the morning round not with noise, but with gesture. A mug of something warm is placed beside your mattress. Not quite tea, not quite broth. A combination of both, you suspect. It smells like thyme, rosemary, and the faint memory of something pickled. You sit up slowly, cradling the mug between your hands, and glance toward the board. It hasn't been erased. Not yet. The names from the night before remain gently smudged, but still proud. Granny Floss 9.8, the Widow 9.4. Osric 9.3U, 8.3. Still holding. You smile to yourself, take a sip of the savory morning brew, and sigh deeply. This inn doesn't keep records in ledgers. It keeps them in memory, in chuckles, in whispered retellings between yawns and spoonfuls of stew. Around you, others begin to stir. Someone stands and stretches joints popping like a series of polite drum beats. Someone else rubs their eyes and mutters, "Did I win? Did I sleep at all?" Another simply says, "I dreamed I was an ox. I woke up more convinced than ever." Breakfast begins. Same pot, same fire, different day. The smell of porridge fills the room, thickened with something earthy and suspicious. There are a few leftover pickled beets on a plate near the wall. Someone tries to turn one into a flute. It fails. Conversation resumes in fragments. "Did you hear the widow's flutter exhale? I thought it was rain on a slate roof." "No, I was the one who sounded like rain." "Friend, you sounded like a boot in a sack of potatoes." "You love all of them." The innkeeper strolls past offering a wink. "Another night tonight," he says. "Heard there might be a duet round. Experimental." Your ears perk. A duet. He nods. They say Osric and Midge are considering a collaboration. Something slow, something with pacing. The idea excites you more than it should. You glance toward the corner where a few guests are already experimenting. One starts a snore, the other harmonizes. They're out of sync, but it's charming. A woman hums softly beneath her breath, then joins in with a sleepy honk that draws applause. You turn back to your breakfast and realize you'll need to nap this afternoon. Not for rest, for rehearsal. Maybe tomorrow your score will rise. Or maybe it won't. But that's not really the point, is it? The point is showing up. Lying down. Taking a breath and sharing it with the world no matter how messy, how wheezy, how absurd it sounds. The inn doesn't care if you're the loudest. It just wants you to be honest. And in this world of chainmail chamber pots and cabbage-heavy diets, honest sleep is a rare and beautiful thing. So you let yourself smile again. Wipe the crumbs from your chin. And start thinking about your next snore. As the day stretches forward, the inn becomes a shifting blend of recovery and rehearsal. Some guests doze again, quick catnaps wrapped in shawls trying to capture fleeting inspiration from the night before. Others hold quiet councils near the fire discussing new techniques with the intensity of monks translating sacred scrolls. Words like side pillow, angle reverse exhale grit, and soft palate vibration loops drift through the air like smoke from an intellectual chimney. You wander to the chalkboard again. This time, you bring a piece of charcoal with you, not to change your score. That's set. That's history. No, you draw a small symbol next to your name. A crooked little swirl, half wind, half question mark. It means in progress. A few others see it and smile. They begin to add their own. Osric draws a perfect spiral. The widow, a tiny line of dots that fade at the end. Toothless Midge simply draws an ear. Then next to that, another smaller ear. It's not about legacy. It's about the sound of trying. That evening the inn fills again. Familiar faces return. A few newcomers arrive confused at first, then slowly pulled into the current. Dinner is thicker tonight. Someone added barley. Maybe even meat, though no one can confirm it. There are murmurs of a bard arriving later in the week, one who performs exclusively in harmony with nearby sleepers. You lie down earlier tonight, not from exhaustion, but readiness. You're starting to understand the discipline of it. How to position your head just so. How to time your breath between the murmurs of those around you. How to listen not to win, but to belong more deeply. As others prepare, you find yourself next to Bruna. She's laying on her side, testing different mouth positions with short puffs. She glances at you. Want to try something? You hesitate, then nod. She explains duet snoring. You mirror me. When I inhale, you exhale. Match my rhythm, not my sound. You lie on your side facing away. Feel the straw scratch your cheek. She starts first. A deep inhale, then a sharp bird-like exhale with a click at the end. You respond a soft whoosh, not perfect, but well-timed. Again. She inhales. You exhale. Soon the rhythm forms. A push and pull. Like rowing a boat together through a swamp made of silk. You don't match tones. You complement each other. After 2 minutes, someone claps. Another cheers. Someone nearby mutters, new category. Has to be. The innkeeper appears squinting like he's tasting sound. Then he points at the chalkboard and writes with extra flourish, First duet, 8.8 tenon. You nearly choke on your own exhale from surprise. Bruna winks. Told you, you've got good tempo. The rest of the room begins to stir again, inspired, energized. Someone starts snoring in rounds. Another attempts harmony with a set of bagpipes unsuccessfully. The chalkboard grows more cluttered symbols, scores, names, and notes. No one tries to win anymore. They try to invent, and in the middle of it you feel yourself growing into something unexpected. A role. A regular. Not the loudest, not the most skilled, but the one who bridges styles, who learns, who listens. You've gone from stranger, to student, and now maybe to Snoresmith. You close your eyes again. Cheeks warm from laughter, lungs full of something better than air connection. And you sleep. This time with purpose. This time with pride. This time, to stay. You wake up slowly the next morning the way a candle guttering into its final wax pool gives off one last flicker. Soft, sleepy, and fully surrendered. You don't rush to open your eyes. There's no need. You know exactly where you are. The smell of barley stew and scorched firewood. The gentle rustle of blankets being adjusted with the enthusiasm of jellyfish. The slow, persistent hum of snoring. Some soft as feathers, some still holding on to last night's performance habits. You open one eye. The rafters greet you like old friends, crooked, familiar, full of secrets. You shift slightly in your straw nest and find that your whistle, the small carved one from days ago, is still around your neck. It's warm against your chest. It feels earned. You sit up and look around. There's a hush in the room. Not silence, never silence, but peace. The kind of hush you hear in monasteries or libraries, only here it's made from breathing. The innkeeper steps into the center of the room. No spoon this morning. No contest. Just his voice low and warm like a kettle that never quite boils. Thank you, he says, for snoring, for showing up, for listening. He doesn't say more. He doesn't need to. One by one, people nod. Bruna raises a cup. Osric bows his head. The widow smiles the smile of someone who will win again, but doesn't need to do it tonight. Granny Floss lets out a small, sharp snore, even though she's clearly awake. Everyone laughs quietly like a sneeze being held in reverence. And then, the lights dim naturally as someone blows out the first candle. Then another, then a third. A guest taps a drum once. Another replies with a woof of breath. It's not a signal, it's just a farewell. Because it's time. Time to rest. Wind down final 300 words. And now, it's your turn. To lie back. To breathe. To let go of all the performances, the rhythms, the scores, the smiles. The inn fades around you not in darkness, but in gentleness. The rafters blur. The straw beneath you feels like waves now slow. Heavy waves rocking you towards something softer than thought. You're not snoring for points. You're not dreaming to impress. You're just here. Still. Warm. Enough. The sounds around you become blurrier. Bruna's sigh blends into Osric's nasal drone. Granny's flutter folds into the widow's whisper. Even the dog with its soft grunts and tail thumps becomes part of the orchestra. And your breath, it joins them. Not too loud. Not too quiet. Just honest. Just human. Let it go. Let your shoulders sink into the straw. Let your thoughts drift like feathers on a stone floor. You are not alone. You are surrounded by sleepers, dreamers, and nasal artisans who've all agreed without speaking that tonight there will be no shame in sound, only sleep. So close your eyes now. Let your mind wander off with the dog. Let the fire fade. Let the last candle go out. You've earned this night, and whatever dream comes next, you'll have an echo, because you were here, and you sang, even if it was through your nose. Good night, stranger. Sweet dreams.